Go.
Good morning. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address you on an issue that has become more and more critical in recent times. The SA Banking Association conference comes only days since signatories to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change delivered the Glasgow Pact, which, amongst other things, acknowledges that commitments made by countries so far to cut emissions of planet-heating greenhouse gases are nowhere near enough to prevent planetary warming from exceeding the 1.5 degree above pre-industrial time temperatures. When I addressed the 26th conference of the parties in Glasgow, I had pointed out that Africa is already facing the full impacts of the climate emergency, even as we struggle to overcome the COVID-19 pandemic, which has exacerbated Africa's special needs and circumstances. Our sustainable development efforts have been set back, and our message to the international community was clear, that we need their support more now than ever before to achieve our climate objectives in the context of a just transition. The UNFCCC in Glasgow dealt with no less than 19 finance-related agenda items, culminating in a host of both procedural and substantive decisions, including 3 cover decisions known as the Glasgow Pact. The Pact calls on the global community to accelerate the development, deployment, and dissemination of technologies and the adoption of policies to transition towards low-emission energy systems, to rapidly scale up the deployment of clean power generation and energy efficiency measures, to accelerate efforts towards the phase down of unabated coal power and phase out of inefficient fossil fuel subsidies, and to provide targeted support to the poorest and most vulnerable in line with national circumstances and recognizing the need for support towards a just transition. Now, Africa has no choice but to join the global drive towards limiting greenhouse gas emissions. However, this action must be considered within the context of Africa's just transition towards a low carbon economy in a manner that recognizes the deep energy poverty across the African continent. I'm proud to say that the South African government remains firmly committed to contributing our best efforts to combating global climate change. President Cyril Ramaphosa has created the Climate Change Commission to research and identify pathways for a just transition to a low carbon economy and a climate resilient society by mid-century. As a country currently heavily dependent on coal for electricity generation, we need to ensure that those employed in the coal value chain are not excluded from any planning and policy implementation towards this low carbon future. Hence, we are committed to ensuring that the transition we have is a just one, that the most climate vulnerable groups participate in decision-making, and that climate compatible social and economic development addresses the needs of these workers and their communities. Transitioning to a lower carbon economy will undoubtedly require extensive policy, legal, technical, and market changes to address mitigation and adaptation measures required related to climate change. In this regard, it is important to note that Eskom, our largest greenhouse gas emitter, has committed in principle to be a net zero emitter by 2050 and has already released calls for proposals to repower and repurpose Komati Power Station in Mpumalanga. Studies to facilitate similar initiatives are underway in Grootvlei, Hendrina, and Camden. This work represents a decisive shift in our energy trajectory and should be welcomed. The Glasgow Climate Pact also called upon the multilateral development banks, other financial institutions, and the private sector to enhance finance mobilization in order to achieve the scale of resources needed to deliver on climate plans, particularly for adaptation. It encourages parties to continue to explore innovative approaches and instruments for mobilizing finance for adaptation from private sources. Reorientating capital to more sustainable investments requires a comprehensive shift in how the financial system works. This is necessary if South Africa is to develop more sustainable economic growth, ensure the stability of the financial system, and foster more transparency and longevity in the economy. The transition will need to be gradual in order to support economic growth, while gradually transitioning away from a carbon-based economy. Ladies and gentlemen, a number of initiatives have been identified for implementation to promote the greening of the South African economy, as highlighted in the draft Financing a Sustainable Economy Technical Paper 2020 to 2022, released by National Treasury. These measures include, first of all, putting a price on carbon via the carbon tax and the publishing of offset regulations to enable a reduction of those taxes through climate positive investments. Secondly, fiscal allocations, which are already being made, such as those for risk mitigation and job creation projects, such as working for water and working on fire, which directly combat the effects of climate change and help build our resilience to events such as alien invasions and wildfires. Draft regulations for carbon offsetting and incentivizing the sale of vehicles with lower carbon emissions during their operating phases. A key development in this regard was the recent announcement by Toyota SA that their eThekwini plant will begin the assembly of a new hybrid model in the fourth quarter of this year. Investment in the green economy and green technologies provides strategic advantages for our country and our continent. It opens access to new green financing opportunities. Transitioning to a lower carbon economy will undoubtedly require extensive policy, legal, technology, and market changes to address mitigation and adaptation requirements. We also need to be cognizant of the fact that in transitioning, there will be social risks associated in relation to loss of employment and livelihoods in some value chains. And we therefore need to ensure that we focus on reskilling and upskilling these workers so that they face a better future. Many of our trading partners have adopted mid-century commitments to net zero, with many major economies also moving in this direction. These are leading to various forms of climate-related non-tariff barriers and border adjustment taxes. There is growing consumer sentiment, and particularly amongst younger consumers, who are demanding more environmentally friendly products and services. Both of these trends could result in many of our exports being at risk, particularly those in the mineral, agricultural, and automotive value chains. However, with these challenges come some important opportunities. These are opportunities which present themselves in sectors such as energy and energy efficiency, the automotive sector, the hydrogen economy, the mining sector with new minerals that will power the green economy, as well as the banking and financial sectors, not only with an increased need for capital, but also the development and deployment of a suite of new innovative financial instruments and vehicles. As a starting point, we do need substantial grant financing from both bilateral and multilateral financial mechanisms and institutions for both adaptation and mitigation, as they are also key for catalyzing climate innovation and de-risking private sector participation. Highly concessional finance, including equity investments from multilateral development banks and financial mechanisms, can also contribute to de-risking and subsequently leveraging private investors. The financial sector and the banking sector in particular must play a key role in mobilizing resources to invest in climate change mitigation in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, as well as mobilizing finances for climate adaptation as we build resilience in our economy and in our society. Africa's financial institutions are well placed as key stakeholders in the evolving global climate finance landscape, helping design solutions and mobilizing private capital for climate action. As a region, Africa could also attract and channel financial flows towards low carbon and climate resilient development investments by leveraging innovative approaches such as sustainability linked loans and with greater participation of financial institutions. Carbon market mechanisms and other environmental credits could be another potential source of financing, depending on how international markets for these credits evolve and how the implementation of the Article 6 market mechanism will unfold post the Glasgow decision. Ladies and gentlemen, in the face of the climate crisis, we have two choices. We can resist change and continue living the way we are doing with the inevitable economic and social consequences. Or we can be brave and pragmatic and seize the opportunities presented to us as we transition to a low carbon future. If we are to ensure that no one in our society is left behind, and if we are to ensure that a just and managed transition helps us to deal with our abiding constraints of poverty, inequality, and unemployment, we must choose the latter path. The solutions that we face are in your hands, and I can only urge you to apply those solutions with greater urgency. I thank you.